Greetings all. Why is the Horus Heresy named after Horus Lupercal and not Lorgar Aurelian, despite Lorgar initially catalysing the fall of half the Primarchs? The Horus Heresy stands as one of the most pivotal events in the sprawling grimdark universe of Warhammer 40,000. This galaxy-spanning civil war not only fractured the Imperium, but also shaped the fate of humanity's future in profound ways. Yet one intriguing question lingers among scholars. Why isn't it called the Lorgar Heresy instead of the Horus Heresy? Given the complexity of the characters involved, Horus, Lorgar, Erebus and Kor Phaeron, we'll dive into the details in this archive and take a deeper look at the historical, thematic and narrative contexts within the lore to answer this lingering question. To properly explore why the heresy bears Horus's name rather than Lorgar's, one must first understand the roles and influences of the key figures involved. Horus Lupercal was the favoured son of the Emperor of Mankind, the Warmaster who was entrusted with leading the Great Crusade at the height of the Imperium's expansion. Lorgar Aurelian, Primarch of the Word-Bearers Legion, was a deeply spiritual and zealous figure whose obsession with religion and the warp set in motion many of the events that catalysed the heresy. Erebus, a chaplain of the Word-Bearers, and Kor Phaeron, the Lord Commander of the Word-Bearers, acted as ideological and tactical agents, pushing Lorgar's religious zeal into a political and military rebellion against the Emperor. Lorgar's importance cannot be understated. He was the first Primarch to fall to chaos, and his legion was the first to openly worship the Chaos Gods, paving the way for the warp's corrupting influence to spread among the other legions. Erebus and Kor Phaeron are infamous for their pivotal roles in manipulating Lorgar and orchestrating the events leading to Horus's fall, such as the Isstvan III atrocity and the Chaos invasion of Terra itself. Despite this, the heresy is named after Horus and not Lorgar. Why? The naming of the Horus Heresy fundamentally reflects the role Horus played as the central figurehead and leader of the rebellion. Horus was not only the greatest and most beloved of the Primarchs, but also the legitimate Warmaster selected by the Emperor to unify humanity's forces. His fall represented the shattering of the Emperor's vision. The rebellion was, at its core, a betrayal centered around Horus himself. Whereas Lorgar's heresy was more spiritual and ideological, permeating the Word-Bearers with a worship of the Chaos Gods, Horus's betrayal was political and symbolic. Horus's Imperium-wide leadership position meant that his defection split the loyalties of more legions than any other Primarch. His rebellion forced many legions to choose sides and represented a civil war, rather than the seeding of heresy alone. In addition, the scale and impact of Horus's role in the conflict undeniably eclipsed others. He was the commander orchestrating the war against the Loyalist forces, directly leading the siege of Terra. The Horus Heresy represented the attempt to tear down the Imperium to its very core. In this way, Horus embodied the treachery and tragedy on a cosmic scale, which is exactly why history remembers the event by his name. Despite the above, it is arguable that Lorgar's heresy was the ideological germ that grew into the full-scale civil war. Lorgar from early in the Crusade demonstrated a compulsion towards religious devotion in a universe dominated by the Emperor's dogma of rationalism and secular unity. His foundation of the Word-Bearers as propagators of faith rather than warriors was an act of rebellion in itself. His worship of the Chaos Gods was the first open challenge to the Emperor's rejection of religion, which set the stage for the emotional and spiritual corruption of legions. Consequently, without Lorgar's heresy, the Warhammer 40K verse might not have experienced the scale of chaos and ruin brought around by the later civil war. Furthermore, Erebus and Kor Phaeron were Lorgar's instruments and enablers. Erebus, through manipulation and deception, specifically orchestrated Horus's corruption by the warp during the mission on Davin, a moment widely recognized as the turning point that ignited the galactic conflict. Kor Phaeron's leadership in steering the Word-Bearers further into demonic worship deepened the irreparable breach between the Emperor and his sons. Thus, while Lorgar's heresy was invisible to many until it triggered Horus's final betrayal, it was no less significant beneath the surface. Warhammer's narrative construction thrives on mythic archetypes and powerful symbolism. Horus, the favoured son turned traitor, represents an ultimate fall from grace akin to Lucifer in the Judeo-Christian theology or the tragic hero in classic literature. The Horus Heresy explicitly captures this theme, The brightest star in humanity's constellation becomes its darkest downfall. Naming the heresy after Horus solidifies this narrative frame. The story is one of betrayal by the one who is meant to lead and protect. Lorgar, while central to the law's ideological foundation, played a more nuanced and indirect role. His failure was spiritual and esoteric, whereas Horus's failure was existential and immediate. One could argue that the Lorgar Heresy would fail to convey the gravity and immediacy of the civil war. Horus's name communicates the imminence of the threat and the scale of devastation in a way Lorgar's perhaps cannot, especially since Lorgar's treachery was cloaked in religious mysticism and began from an ideological undercurrent rather than open military insurrection. Erebus and Kor Phaeron symbolized the manipulation behind the scenes. Erebus, known for his fanaticism and cunning, ensured the spiritual corruption latched onto Horus. His role in corrupting Horus demonstrates the complex chain of influence. Lorgar's spiritual heresy, powered by Erebus's duplicity, enabled Horus's military and political betrayal. Kor Phaeron's authoritative control over the word-bearers solidified the chaos worship that underpinned the heresy's ideological basis. His significance, while critical, belongs more to the realm of subterfuge and sedition than in open conflict's face. By highlighting Horus as the face of the heresy, it emphasizes the human cost and tragic fallibility of a leader, rather than focusing on the more abstract and esoteric roots of the rebellion. The Imperium itself, and as an institution, frames the events as the Horus Heresy. This reflects official history propagated by the Emperor's surviving loyalists, who understandably vilify Horus, whom they saw as the ultimate traitor. Had the event been named the Lorgar Heresy, it might imply that the rebellion was primarily about religious dissent, which the Imperium seeks to suppress or deny. Branding it as the Horus Heresy focuses the blame on the military commander, whose betrayal sparked the civil war, thus simplifying the narrative for political and propagandistic purposes. Furthermore, chaos cults and factions sympathetic to Lorgar and the word-bearers might emphasize the spiritual truth and sanctity of Lorgar's faith, but they remain minority viewpoints within the context of the greater human empire. Ultimately, the Horus Heresy's name is less about undermining the roles of Lorgar, Erebus, or Kor Phaeron, and more about the overwhelming significance of Horus's rebellion as the hinge on which the fate of the Imperium turned. Lorgar's heresy was the spiritual soil, Erebus and Kor Phaeron were the catalyst that fanned the flame, but Horus was the blaze himself, visible to all and impossible to ignore. In the darkness of the soul, even the brightest star can fall. This encapsulates why Horus, shining brightest among the Primarchs, falls into infamy as the heresy's namesake, while Lorgar's foundational but subtler role remains acknowledged, yet overshadowed by the tragic grandeur of Horus's fall. This archive has now been fully decoded. Continue your journey into the librarian with the video displayed on screen. The vast wealth of the archives continues to reveal new knowledge of the dark history of the 40k verse. In the grimdark of the far future, there is only war.